Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Morphy Auction Company taking a look at one of the guns that they're going to be selling in their upcoming April of 2019 Premier Firearms Auction. Just have to kind of peek over the case for this guy. This is a sporting shotgun, and I don't normally cover that sort of thing. It's not something that I have a particular amount of expertise in, but in this case, I thought it would be pretty cool to take a look at if you imagine, what would be the personal sporting shotgun of, say, the chairman of the USSR in 1959? That's exactly what we have. This is a shotgun that was presented to Nikita Kruschev in 1959 at the opening of the 21st session of the Soviet Union Communist Party. And it is, in fact, one of the finest models of Soviet sporting shotgun that was made at that time. This is an MTs-11. It is basically, mechanically speaking, it is a copy of the Purdey system, which, of course, that was patented in the 1880s. Its patents had long expired by the time this was made, and quite a lot of very good gun makers copied it. In fact, it was a fairly complicated system to make, and you had to be a pretty decent gun maker to successfully manufacture a Purdey design, Purdey patent type shotgun. So people shouldn't take the fact that it's a copy of a Purdey as being something distinctly Soviet or inferior in this case. These are magnificent guns. At the time, these were, as expensive as you might expect. This was cost-wise the equivalent of a very nice luxury car. They only made about 600 of them in between 1951 and 1960. After 1960, it would be replaced with a different design. Things kind of progressed along. But the non-really super embellished ones were made for things like Olympic shooting, very, very serious competition shooting. And then, of course, the engraved, the embellished ones were made for VIPs, guys like Khrushchev. So let's take a closer look at this, because whether the engraving is to your taste or not, it is quite elaborate and distinctive. So the gun comes in this case that looks really quite beautiful on the outside. It's got this brass engraving of what I assume is red square. What's interesting, though, is once you open it up, yes, we have some nice red cloth, but the overall quality of the case is absolutely 180 degrees opposite of the gun. Apparently, the quality of the case itself just wasn't considered like all that relevant. If you look at some things here, like the edge of the felt where it attaches to the sidewalls, the edges right here where the dividers bump up against each other, it's just completely unfinished. You see the same thing down there at the end. The felt lining up at the top here on the lid doesn't even come all the way to the edge of the lid. So it just seems really counterintuitive to me that the gun would be so nicely finished, and we'll put the gun together and take a look at it in just a moment, and yet the case itself is so lackadaisically built. If you happen to notice that this looks like it has a relatively short length of pull, you would be correct. This was personally fitted for Khrushchev, and he was actually a fairly short guy. He was like 5'3". So it does, in fact, have a relatively short length of pull. Now, to look at the more important features here, starting at the very back end, we have skip line checkering, including the butt of the gun. It doesn't actually have a separate butt plate. I would like to make some sort of communist-related joke about that, but that's actually not all that uncommon for high-end guns like this. All the really good stuff in here is on the action, so the left, the right, and the bottom, and it's got quite a bit of depth to it. This isn't just surface engraving. These areas are quite high, and the inset of the panel has been cut down substantially, and then lightly engraved. And I think it gives a really cool effect of really a truly three-dimensional effect there. So a lot of this is all designed to represent the best of the Soviet Union. So harvested wheat, monument to the workers, grain silo. The top here is a little more ordinary, but again, some of this really deep relief engraving that I think is pretty darn cool. The left side is fairly similar in theme to the right. Again, we've got statues, we've got some airplanes, we've got hydroelectric dam, symbols of agriculture and industry there. And of course, hammer and sickles liberally scattered across. And then on the bottom, we have a bit more decorative rather than themed and mural-like. We have presumably the Communist Manifesto there. I believe that says Lenin on it, with a bust of Lenin. And then, we've got flags, we've got laurels, kind of the typical stuff you might expect for a very patriotic sort of design. And then up at the very top, we have inlaid in gold the manifesto of the Communist Party, or the motto of the Communist Party, which is typically translated into English as "Workers of the World Unite." I think the literal translation is something a little more along the lines of, like, the proletariat of all nations come together, which is perhaps a little bit ironic to be inlaid in gold on a extremely expensive luxury shotgun. There's a little inlaid plaque on the underside of the stock that has Khrushchev's initials. And then the rest of the gun is actually relatively unadorned. They really put the focus here on the action and right in the center of the gun, and didn't spend a lot of time, it seems, on a lot of the rest of it. So we have marks for Tula there, and a little bit of embroidery sort of stuff at the back of the barrels. The barrels have been coated in a lacquer of some sort, so the finish is actually what you see here underneath the lacquer. The fore end is a little bit unusually wide, pretty chunky, pretty hefty. It is a push-button removal type fore end. And as we get out towards the end of the muzzles, the barrels remain just plain and unadorned out to the end. If I go ahead and take this off, we can see a few of the markings that are on the barrels underneath. Actually, start here. Like I said, this is an MTs-11. Serial number is 5674. The 11s were serial numbered in series with other guns that were made. There were only 600 of the 11s, but they were not the first guns made. With the barrels removed, we have kind of the typical information you would expect up here. We've got the serial number of the gun and the model number, and then we've got choke information, proofing description of the charge that it was intended to be fired with. I have no idea what this writing translates to. Perhaps someone will mention it in the comments. If you speak Russian, let me know, I'm curious. There isn't really anything on the inside of the action itself other than the model and the serial number again. So the company, or the organization that manufactured this gun and manufactured a bunch of other high-end sporting rifles and shotguns, has a name that is abbreviated TsKIB SOO. And the TS there is a single letter in Cyrillic that doesn't translate into English. And that the whole name, spelled out, translates into this incredibly, just so stereotypically Soviet name of the Central Research and Design Bureau for Sporting and Hunting Firearms. Like, it doesn't get any more Soviet than that, at least not in my mind. And this is a company based in Tula. Now, a lot of people, there's obviously not much information, not a lot of widespread interest in Soviet sporting guns here in the United States. Of course, they're not exactly readily available to us. And so people don't typically know much about them. And there's an assumption that, like, if it's made in Tula, well, okay, that's the Tula arsenal. You know, we know Tula made Mosins, we know Tula made this and made that. And it's a misconception because just like here in the US, we have Springfield, and we have Springfield Armory, we have the Springfield Arsenal. One of those is an entirely modern private company, and one of them is an old and in fact defunct now government arsenal. And then there are a bunch of other gun companies that are in Springfield, especially in older periods before we had the transportation and the communication networks that we have today. If there was a big arsenal set up in one place, you would tend to see a lot of other gun-making businesses located in that same city. The supplies were there. Typically, those arsenals would be set up in places that had good access to water power, for running machine tools, good access to raw materials. And then, of course, these other smaller companies would often act as subcontractors for major government arsenals. So just as every gun that says Springfield on it doesn't come from the government arsenal at Springfield, so every gun that says Tula or that was made in Tula does not actually come from one formal government arsenal in Tula. So these things are often called Vostoks or called Baikals, largely because those are brand names that we recognize here from something and kind of just apply them as an overall blanket term to anything that may have come out of Russia or come out of that particular area of Russia. So if you are the sort of person who is particularly interested in high-end sporting guns, there's, I think, an interesting world of models and production history to take a look at with these guys in Tula. Of course, if you happen to be a Cold War historian and fanatic with extremely deep pockets, or perhaps a Russian oligarch who would like to have Nikita Khrushchev's personal presentation shotgun, it is right here, and it's coming up for sale at the Morphy Auction House. If you click the link in the description below, not the shotgun, but below that, you'll find a link to ForgottenWeapons.com, and from there you can click over to the Morphy catalog page on this guy with their pictures, their description, their price estimate, and functionality to place a bid for it right there on their website, or simply have a gander at the cool pictures and then browse through all the other things they have in the auction. Thanks for watching.